Young lady slapped wrong guy by mistake, but did not know he was a millionaire, and fell in love with her. The cafe hummed with the low murmur of conversation, the clinking of ceramic cups, and the faint aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Elena Carter sat near the window, her laptop open, though the words on the screen blurred as her mind raced. Her day had been a disaster. Hours earlier, she had caught her now ex-boyfriend flirting shamelessly with another girl. The betrayal had cut deep, leaving her seething with anger and a throbbing ache in her chest. She was trying to focus on anything else when her phone buzzed. Another message from him. "Elena, can we just talk?" It wasn't a big deal. With a frustrated growl, she shoved her phone into her bag, the force knocking over her coffee cup. "Damn it," she muttered, grabbing a napkin to clean the spill. In her haste, her scarf fell unnoticed to the floor. At the counter, Alexander Pierce stood waiting for his black coffee. Dressed in a crisp button-down shirt and dark slacks, he exuded an understated confidence. His success as the founder of a thriving tech company wasn't immediately obvious. He preferred to keep a low profile. Spotting the fallen scarf near Elena's table, he picked it up, intending to return it. "Excuse me," he began as he approached her table, the scarf in hand. Elena, still fuming from her earlier ordeal, didn't hear his words clearly. All she noticed was a figure suddenly looming beside her, far too close for comfort. Her mind flashed to every warning about men who preyed on unsuspecting women. "How dare you touch me like that?" she snapped, her voice sharp and loud enough to turn heads. Alexander froze, caught off guard. "Wait, I didn't," he started, his brows furrowing in confusion. Elena stood, her chair scraping back against the floor. "Don't deny it," she interrupted, her eyes blazing with fury. Before he could utter another word, her hand flew up, slap. The sound echoed in the cafe, silencing the chatter. Gasps rippled through the room as every pair of eyes turned toward them. Alexander's cheek stung from the impact, but the real blow was the humiliation. He held up the scarf, his voice low but steady. "I was just trying to give this back to you. You dropped it." Elena's breath caught. She glanced at the scarf, her mind piecing together the situation far too late. The color drained from her face as the realization hit her. "Oh my God," she whispered, her anger evaporating into shock. But before she could apologize, Alexander stepped back, his expression unreadable. "It's fine," he said curtly, dropping the scarf onto the table. "Have a good day." Without another glance, he turned and walked out, the cafe door swinging shut behind him. Elena stood frozen, mortified as the weight of her mistake settled over her. Around her, the cafe patrons whispered, their stares burning into her back. One barista muttered, "What was that about?" Another shrugged. "Who knows?" But he didn't look like he deserved it. Elena's hands trembled as she sank back into her chair, her cheeks burning with shame. "What have I done?" She wanted to run after him, to explain, but the humiliation of the moment rooted her to her seat. The scarf lay on the table, a silent reminder of her outburst. She buried her face in her hands, the sting of tears threatening to fall. Little did she know this was just the beginning of her story with the man she had so completely misjudged. The next week brought Elena a fresh start, or so she thought. Dressed in her best blazer and pencil skirt, she stood outside the gleaming glass tower of Pierce Innovations, clutching her portfolio. This was her dream opportunity, an internship at one of the top tech companies in the country. After the disaster at the cafe, she had thrown herself into preparing for this interview, determined to make a good impression. Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the heavy glass doors and stepped into the sleek, modern lobby. "Here we go," she murmured, steeling her nerves. The interview started smoothly. Seated across from a panel of 2 HR representatives, Elena confidently answered questions about her skills, her academic background, and her passion for innovation. Her poise seemed to impress them, and as the interview wrapped up, the lead representative smiled warmly. "We have one final step in the process. Our CEO likes to personally meet all potential interns." Elena blinked in surprise. The CEO? Before she could ask further, the representative stood and gestured toward a nearby door. "He'll meet you in his office." As she entered the spacious office, the first thing Elena noticed was the wall of floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a panoramic view of the city. The second thing she noticed was the man seated behind the massive oak desk. Her breath caught. It was him. The man from the cafe. The man she had slapped. Alexander looked up from his laptop, his sharp blue eyes locking onto hers. For a brief moment, his expression flickered with recognition. But then, just as quickly, His face returned to a mask of cool indifference. Elena's heart pounded in her chest. "Miss Carter," he said, his voice calm but distant. "Please have a seat." Elena hesitated, the memory of her mistake crashing over her. "Mr. Pierce, Sit," he interrupted, his tone leaving no room for argument. Flustered, she obeyed, perching nervously on the edge of the chair. The next few minutes were excruciating. Alexander asked her a series of professional questions, his demeanor polite but detached. He didn't mention the CAF incident, but the tension in the room was palpable. Elena stumbled through her answers, unable to shake the feeling that he was silently judging her. When the interview finally ended, Alexander closed her portfolio and leaned back in his chair, regarding her with an unreadable expression. "We'll let you know," he said curtly. Elena stood, her palms damp with sweat. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice barely audible. As she turned to leave, she couldn't resist glancing back. Alexander was already focused on his laptop, as if she had been dismissed from his thoughts entirely. To Elena's surprise, she received an email 2 days later. Subject: internship offer, Pierce Innovations. She got the job. But her relief was short-lived when she read the details. Her role would involve working directly with Alexander on several key projects. On her first day, she arrived at the office early, determined to prove herself. But from the moment she stepped into Alexander's conference room, the dynamic was tense. "Good morning, Miss Carter," Alexander greeted her with a clipped tone, not even glancing up from his tablet. "Good morning, Mr. Pierce," she replied, trying to maintain her composure. Throughout the meeting, Alexander remained professional but distant, never addressing her directly unless necessary. Every suggestion she made was met with a polite but dismissive noted. By the end of the day, Elena was fuming. Back in her small apartment, she paced the living room, venting to her best friend over the phone. "I can't believe this is my life," she groaned. "Not only is he my boss, but he's treating me like I'm invisible." Her friend chuckled. "You did slap him in public, Elena." "That was a mistake," she snapped. "And he knows it. Why doesn't he just call me out on it instead of giving me the cold shoulder?" "Maybe he's testing you," her friend suggested. Elena sighed, flopping onto the couch. "Well, if he's testing my patience, he's succeeding." As the weeks passed, their interactions remained tense. Alexander never mentioned the cafe incident, but Elena could feel the unspoken tension simmering between them. Despite her frustrations, she couldn't help but notice things about him: his sharp intellect, his ability to command a room, the quiet moments when his focus was so intense it was almost intimidating. But she also noticed something else. Behind the cold exterior, there were glimpses of someone different. A fleeting smile when a project succeeded, a quiet word of encouragement to a struggling team member. And though she hated to admit it, those glimpses intrigued her. For now, however, she had one goal: prove to Alexander Pierce that she was more than her mistake. The bustling energy of the office was palpable as Pierce Innovations prepared for their quarterly review meeting. The team worked tirelessly to finalize their presentations, and Elena found herself at the center of the chaos, juggling last-minute edits and ensuring every detail was perfect. Despite Alexander's aloof demeanor, she had made progress in proving herself. But the tension between them remained unspoken, a silent weight hanging over their interactions. The meeting began smoothly, with various department heads presenting updates. Alexander sat at the head of the table, his presence commanding without effort. Elena was seated farther down, taking notes and occasionally glancing at him, her thoughts drifting back to the incident at the cafe. She had tried to forget it, to move past it, but the guilt lingered, especially in moments like these, when Alexander's calm professionalism reminded her how deeply she had misjudged him. It was during the QA session that everything unraveled. One of the marketing leads, a confident young man named Derek, leaned back in his chair and asked casually, "Mr. Pierce, I've always admired how you handle challenges with such composure. Tell me, what's the most unexpected situation you've dealt with recently?" The room chuckled lightly, but Alexander's expression didn't change. He glanced briefly at Elena, and for a split second, she saw something in his eyes: amusement. Then, his lips curved into the faintest smile. "Well," he began, his tone light, "let's just say I've learned the importance of patience in unexpected circumstances. For example." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room before landing on Elena again. "Returning a scarf can be far more complicated than one might think." The room chuckled, unaware of the context, but Elena froze. Her heart dropped. The subtle emphasis, the flicker of humor in his voice, it was clear. He was talking about her. After the meeting, Elena lingered in the conference room, her mind racing. He knows. He's known all along. Her cheeks burned as she remembered the slap, the accusations, the public humiliation she had inflicted on him. For weeks, she had convinced herself he had forgotten. But now, she realized he hadn't. He had just chosen not to retaliate. And that realization stung more than any scolding ever could. Later that day, Elena found her chance. Alexander was in his office reviewing documents when she knocked lightly on the open door. "Mr. Pierce." He looked up, his expression neutral. "Miss Carter, do you need something?" She hesitated, stepping inside and closing the door behind her. I wanted to talk to you about something. Something personal." He set down his pen, leaning back in his chair. "Go on." Elena took a deep breath, her hands twisting nervously. "I think you know what this is about. The cafe. What I did." His expression didn't change. "What about it?" Her voice trembled. "I'm sorry. I was wrong. I misunderstood the situation, and I overreacted. I shouldn't have done what I did." For a moment, he said nothing, his gaze steady and unreadable. Then, he leaned forward slightly. "Why are you telling me this now?" Elena swallowed hard. "Because it's been bothering me. I know I humiliated you in front of everyone, and you didn't deserve that. I don't know why you didn't call me out on it, but I just wanted to say I'm sorry." Alexander's lips pressed into a thin line. "I appreciate the apology," he said simply, his tone cool. But there was no warmth in his voice, no sign of forgiveness. Elena's heart sank. "I mean it," she added, her voice quieter now. "I really do." "I'm sure you do," he replied, already turning his attention back to his documents. "If that's all, Miss Carter, I have work to do." Her chest tightened, but she nodded, retreating from the office. As she walked down the hall, the weight of his indifference pressed heavily on her. He doesn't believe me. And the worst part, she couldn't blame him. The following week, the tension between them remained, but Elena threw herself into her work, determined to prove herself in other ways. When a major project encountered delays due to a sick team member, Elena stepped up, taking on additional tasks to ensure everything stayed on track. She worked late nights, coordinating between departments, triple-checking every detail. Her efforts didn't go unnoticed. One evening, Alexander entered the conference room where Elena was huddled over a stack of documents. "Miss Carter," he said, his voice breaking the silence. She looked up, startled. "Mr. Pierce, I was just finishing up the logistics for the presentation tomorrow." He approached the table, his gaze scanning the neatly organized files. "I see. You've been handling this project almost single-handedly since Derek fell ill." "It's a team effort," she replied quickly. Alexander raised an eyebrow. "Is it?" Elena hesitated, unsure how to respond. He straightened, his expression softening ever so slightly. "You've done well," he said, his tone quieter now. "Your dedication is impressive." Her eyes widened in surprise. "Thank you, Mr. Pierce." He nodded, lingering for a moment before turning to leave. But as he reached the door, he paused. "And, Miss Carter?" "Yes?" His gaze met hers, and for the first time, there was a hint of warmth in his voice. "About the cafe, I don't hold grudges. You can stop beating yourself up over it." Her breath caught. He gave her a small, almost imperceptible smile before walking out, leaving her stunned. For the first time, she felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps the walls between them were finally starting to come down. The days at Pierce Innovations grew busier as the team worked toward the launch of a major product. Long hours, endless revisions, and tight deadlines became the norm, forcing Alexander and Elena to interact more closely than ever before. At first, their exchanges remained strictly professional, brief to the point, and focused on work. But as the pressure mounted, cracks began to form in their carefully maintained walls. One evening, long after most employees had left for the day, Alexander found Elena in the conference room. She was seated cross-legged on a chair, her laptop balanced precariously on one knee as she scribbled notes into a notebook with her free hand. Her hair, usually neatly styled, was pulled into a messy bun, and her blazer had been discarded over the back of the chair. Despite her disheveled appearance, there was a fierce determination in her eyes as she worked. Alexander cleared his throat, causing her to glance up. "Still here?" he asked, leaning casually against the doorframe. Elena sighed, pushing a stray strand of hair from her face. Apparently, deadlines don't care about sleep. He chuckled softly and walked into the room, setting his tablet on the table. You know, delegating is allowed, he said, his tone lighter than usual. Not when you're the newbie, she replied, flashing him a tired but genuine smile. Alexander watched her for a moment, his gaze softening. Coffee? He offered. She blinked in surprise. Sure. Minutes later, they sat together in the quiet break room, steaming mugs of coffee in hand. The conversation started predictably, revolving around the project. But as the night wore on, it drifted into more personal territory. You're not what I expected, Alexander said suddenly, breaking a lull in the conversation. Elena frowned slightly. What do you mean? When you first started, I thought you were impulsive, maybe a bit reckless. Her cheeks flushed. You mean because I slapped you? He smirked, taking a sip of his coffee. It didn't help. She groaned, burying her face in her hands. I'll never live that down, will I? Probably not, he teased. Then, more seriously, he added, but I was wrong. You're passionate, smart, and you care about what you do. That's rare. Elena looked up, her surprise evident. Thank you. Over the following weeks, moments like these became more frequent. Late-night brainstorming sessions turned into quiet conversations about life outside work. Elena shared stories of her college days, her love for literature, and her dreams of making a difference in the tech world. Alexander listened intently, his usual guarded demeanor softening as he began to see her not just as an employee, but as someone remarkable in her own right. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, Alexander invited Elena to join him for dinner at a small bistro near the office. Just to discuss the project, he clarified, though the slight hesitation in his voice suggested otherwise. As they sat by the window, the warm glow of the restaurant's lights creating a cozy ambience, Elena finally mustered the courage to ask something that had been on her mind. Why do you do it? She asked, setting down her fork. Do what? This. The company, the long hours, the constant pressure. You're already successful. You could walk away anytime. Alexander leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. Do you know what it's like to always be defined by something you didn't earn? He asked quietly. Elena tilted her head, waiting for him to continue. My family is, let's just say, well known. My father built his own empire, and for as long as I can remember, people have looked at me and seen his son. Not Alexander. Just the heir to his success. He paused, swirling the wine in his glass. I started this company to prove that I could succeed on my own, that I'm more than just a name or a bank account. Elena's heart ached at the vulnerability in his voice. That must be exhausting, she said softly. He nodded. It is, but it's also worth it. She smiled. For what it's worth, I think you've already proven yourself. Alexander met her gaze, a small, genuine smile curving his lips. Thank you, Elena. That means more than you know. As the weeks turned into months, their bond deepened. Alexander began to notice things about Elena he hadn't before. The way she lit up when discussing her ideas, the quiet determination in her every action, the kindness she showed to everyone around her. She wasn't just capable. She was extraordinary. And slowly, without realizing it, she began to chip away at the walls he had built around his heart. For Elena, the change was just as profound. The man she had once dismissed as cold and detached now seemed so much more. Beneath his stoic exterior was someone who cared deeply, who carried the weight of expectations yet still sought to uplift those around him. He wasn't just her boss anymore. He was someone she admired. And maybe, just maybe, someone she could come to love. The energy in the office was tense, almost suffocating. Alexander paced back and forth in his glass-walled office, the usual calm confidence he exuded replaced by visible frustration. Pierce Innovations had hit a major roadblock. A last-minute change from one of their largest clients threatened to derail the product launch they had spent months preparing. Alexander had always thrived under pressure, but this time, the stakes felt higher. The setback wasn't just a professional blow, it was personal. Elena sat at her desk, watching him through the glass. She had never seen him like this. Is he okay? One of her colleagues whispered. Elena shook her head slightly. I don't know. She couldn't ignore the pull in her chest, the urge to help. She had worked closely with Alexander long enough to know how much this company meant to him. Grabbing her notebook, she stood, squaring her shoulders. If I'm not back in an hour, tell HR it's been nice working here, she joked lightly, earning a laugh from her colleague. Inside the office, Alexander glanced up as she entered. Elena, he said, his voice tight. I'm busy. I know, she replied, shutting the door behind her. But I think I can help. He raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. Help? Yes, she said, her tone steady. I've been working on a backup proposal in case the client pulled something like this. It's not perfect, but it could buy us time. Alexander stared at her for a moment, his frustration giving way to curiosity. You prepared for this? Elena nodded. I had a feeling something might go wrong, so I started drafting alternatives a few weeks ago. Without a word, Alexander gestured for her to continue. She placed her notebook on the table, walking him through her ideas step by step. As she spoke, Alexander's expression softened. For the first time all day, he felt a glimmer of hope. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. You're full of surprises, Miss Carter, he said quietly. Elena smiled back. I've been told that before. That evening, as the office emptied and the two of them remained, Alexander looked across the room at Elena, who was buried in her laptop. He couldn't help but feel a growing sense of admiration and something more. For so long he had convinced himself that work was all that mattered, that emotions had no place in his life. But now, watching Elena's dedication, her kindness, and the way she never hesitated to step up when it mattered most, he felt something shift. The following weekend, Pierce Innovations hosted its annual corporate gala. The ballroom sparkled with chandeliers and champagne glasses, the air buzzing with conversation. Elena, dressed in a stunning navy gown, felt out of place among the crowd of executives and socialites, but she held her head high. Alexander spotted her from across the room, his breath catching for a moment. She looked radiant. For most of the evening, Alexander kept his distance, unsure how to approach her. But his resolve wavered when he noticed a familiar face approaching her, Nathan Hayes, a competitor and frequent thorn in Alexander's side. Nathan was charming, suave, and most annoyingly, overly confident. And now, he was talking to Elena. Alexander's jaw tightened as he watched Nathan laugh at something Elena said, his hand resting casually on the back of her chair. The sight stirred something deep within him, an unfamiliar but unmistakable pang of jealousy. Elena noticed Alexander's gaze from across the room. His expression was unreadable, but there was an intensity in his eyes that sent a shiver down her spine. Your boss looks like he's plotting my demise, Nathan joked, following her gaze. Elena laughed nervously. He's just focused. Nathan leaned closer, his tone playful. Well, if you ever get tired of working for him, I'd be happy to steal you for my team. Elena smiled politely, but her thoughts were elsewhere. She couldn't stop thinking about Alexander. Finally, unable to stand it any longer, Alexander crossed the room. Elena, he said, his voice firm but calm. May I have a word? Nathan raised an eyebrow but stepped back with a smirk. Of course. Don't let me keep you. Alexander ignored him, his focus solely on Elena. Is everything okay? She asked as he led her toward a quieter corner of the ballroom. He hesitated for a moment, searching for the right words. I didn't like seeing you with him, he admitted finally. Elena blinked, taken aback. What? Alexander ran a hand through his hair, uncharacteristically vulnerable. I care about you, Elena, more than I should. And seeing him talk to you, it made me realize how much you mean to me. Her heart raced at his words, her breath catching in her throat. Alexander, I know this is unexpected, he continued, his voice softer now, but I can't ignore it anymore. You're more than just an employee to me. You're everything. Elena stared at him, emotions swirling within her. For so long she had fought her growing feelings for him, convincing herself it was one-sided. But now, hearing his confession, she felt a spark of hope. She took a deep breath, her voice trembling as she replied. You mean a lot to me too, she admitted, but this is complicated. Alexander nodded, his gaze steady. I'm willing to face any complication if it means being with you. In that moment, the tension between them melted away, replaced by a fragile but undeniable connection. And for the first time, both of them allowed themselves to imagine what could be. The days following the gala had been a whirlwind. For Elena, the memory of Alexander's confession lingered like a warm glow, even as they returned to the familiar routine of work. She hadn't fully processed what it meant for them, but she knew one thing for certain, her feelings for him were real. Alexander, on the other hand, had been quieter than usual. Though his demeanor at work remained professional, there was a newfound softness in the way he looked at her, a silent acknowledgement of the moment they had shared. But that fragile understanding between them was about to be tested in the worst way. One afternoon, Elena was delivering a report to Alexander's office. The door was slightly ajar, and as she approached, she overheard voices. Inside, Alexander was speaking to a potential investor, a man with a sharp voice and an even sharper tongue. "So," the investor said, his tone sly, "I noticed you've been spending a lot of time with that young assistant of yours." Alexander's voice was calm but firm. "She's a talented employee. Her work speaks for itself." "Talented, sure," the investor replied, a hint of mockery in his voice. "But come on, Alexander. A man like you doesn't get involved unless there's something personal." Elena froze outside the door, her heart pounding. Alexander's response was measured but chilling in its detachment. "She's an asset to the company. That's all." The words hit Elena like a slap. "An asset? That's all?" She couldn't hear the rest of the conversation over the rush of blood in her ears. Her chest tightened as doubt and humiliation washed over her. Had she misread everything? The stolen moments, his confession, the way he looked at her, had it all been meaningless? Elena spent the rest of the day in a daze. She replayed his words over and over, each repetition cutting deeper. By the time she returned home, her mind was made up. She couldn't stay. Not when she felt like a pawn in whatever game Alexander was playing. The next morning, Elena handed her resignation letter to HR. She avoided Alexander's office, knowing she wouldn't be able to face him without breaking down. Instead, she left a brief email explaining her departure. Subject: resignation. Alexander, thank you for the opportunities I've had at Pierce Innovations. However, I believe it's time for me to move on. My last day will be at the end of the week. Best regards, Elena Carter. When Alexander read the email, he felt like the ground had been pulled out from under him. He reread it twice, disbelief turning to panic. Why was she leaving? His mind raced, trying to piece together what could have gone wrong. He called her immediately, but the call went to voicemail. "Elena, it's Alexander. Please call me back. We need to talk." But the hours passed with no response. Desperate for answers, Alexander sought out Khalid, his assistant. "Do you know why Elena resigned?" he asked, his voice tight with frustration. Khalid hesitated. "She's been quiet all day. But I did hear something about her overhearing your conversation with Mr. Grayson yesterday." Alexander's stomach sank. Grayson, the investor who had made that crude remark about Elena. What had she heard? Realization dawned, and with it came a crushing sense of regret. She misunderstood, Alexander murmured, his voice barely audible. Khalid frowned. Misunderstood what? Alexander didn't answer. He was already heading out the door. That evening, Elena was packing up her desk when Alexander appeared. Elena. She stiffened at the sound of his voice but didn't look up. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her tone flat. "I came to talk," he said, stepping closer. "I got your email." "There's nothing to talk about," she replied, forcing her voice to remain steady. Alexander's gaze softened. "If this is about what you heard yesterday." Her head snapped up, anger flashing in her eyes. "Don't," she interrupted. "Don't try to justify it. I heard you, Alexander. I heard you call me an asset. Is that all I am to you? A useful tool?" His chest tightened at the pain in her voice. "That's not what I meant," he said quietly. "Grayson was out of line, and I was trying to shut him down without escalating the situation. And you thought dismissing me like that was the best way to do it." Alexander ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident on his face. "I handled it poorly," he admitted. "But you have to know, Elena, that's not how I see you. You're not just an employee. You're so much more than that." She stared at him, her expression conflicted. "Then why didn't you say that? Why didn't you stand up for me?" Alexander's shoulders sagged. "Because I was afraid," he confessed. "Afraid that if I said what I really felt, it would cost me the deal. And that's no excuse, I see that now, but please believe me when I say I regret it." Elena shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "It's not just about yesterday, Alexander. It's about trust. And right now, I don't know if I can trust you." Her words hit him harder than he expected. "I'll earn it back," he said softly. "If you give me the chance, I'll prove to you that you can." Elena hesitated, torn between the hurt he had caused and the genuine remorse in his eyes. "Maybe," she whispered, her voice trembling. "But not here, not now." And with that, she turned and walked away, leaving Alexander standing alone, vowing to do whatever it took to make things right. The grand conference room at Pierce Innovations buzzed with energy as employees gathered for the quarterly town hall meeting. Alexander stood at the front, flanked by his leadership team, exuding his usual confidence, but inside, he was anything but calm. Today wasn't just about the company's achievements or plans. Today he was going to do something far more personal. He scanned the crowd, hoping to spot her. Elena. She hadn't responded to his calls or emails in the weeks since her resignation, and he had respected her space. But when Khalid mentioned she had been invited to the town hall as a gesture of appreciation for her contributions, Alexander knew this was his chance. And then he saw her. Elena sat near the back, her posture poised but distant. She avoided his gaze, but he could feel the tension radiating from her. He took a deep breath. It was now or never. The meeting began as usual, with updates on company milestones and upcoming projects. But as the formalities wound down, Alexander stepped forward, the room falling silent as his commanding presence filled the space. Before we conclude, he began, his voice steady, I'd like to take a moment to address something important, something personal. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Elena's heart raced as she sat up straighter, sensing where this was going. Alexander continued, his gaze sweeping the room before settling on her. Over the past few months, I've learned that success means nothing if you lose sight of the people who make it all possible. And sometimes you don't realize how much someone means to you until it's too late. The room fell silent. I want to take this moment to acknowledge someone who has been an incredible part of this company, someone whose dedication and passion have left a lasting impact, not just on our work but on me personally. Alexander stepped away from the podium, his eyes locked on Elena's. Elena Carter. A collective gasp echoed through the room as all eyes turned to her. Elena froze, her cheeks burning. Your contributions to Pierce Innovations have been invaluable, Alexander said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. But I failed to see how much more you brought, your heart, your determination, your courage. I made mistakes. I let my pride and fear cloud my judgment, and in doing so, I hurt someone I cared deeply about. Elena's breath caught. I'm here to say, in front of everyone, that I'm sorry. Not just for the misunderstandings, but for not standing up for you when I should have. For not showing you the respect you deserve. The room was utterly still, every pair of eyes darting between Alexander and Elena. I don't care about deals or investors, he continued, his voice growing stronger. What I care about is you, Elena, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn your trust again. For a moment, the silence was deafening. Then, slowly, Elena stood, her legs trembling as she met his gaze. Alexander, she began, her voice shaking slightly. This is a lot. He nodded, his expression vulnerable. I know, and I'll understand if you're not ready to forgive me. But I needed you to know how I feel. The room watched, holding its collective breath. Elena's heart raced as she processed his words. The sincerity in his voice, the way he was laying everything bare, not just to her but to everyone, was unlike anything she had expected. Finally, she spoke. You hurt me, she said quietly, and I wasn't sure if I could ever trust you again. But seeing this, seeing you own up to your mistakes in front of everyone, she paused, her voice breaking. It means more than you know. Alexander's shoulders relaxed slightly, hope flickering in his eyes. So, she said, a small smile tugging at her lips. Maybe we can start over. A wave of murmurs swept through the room, followed by applause. Alexander's face broke into a rare, genuine smile as he nodded. I'd like that, he said softly. The weeks that followed were a time of rebuilding. Elena returned to Pierce Innovations, but this time their dynamic was different. Alexander treated her not just as a valuable team member but as an equal, someone whose opinions he deeply respected. Outside the office, their relationship blossomed. They took things slowly, learning more about each other with every shared meal, every late-night conversation, every quiet moment spent together. For Alexander, Elena became a source of strength and balance, someone who reminded him of what truly mattered. For Elena, Alexander proved that even the most guarded hearts could change with time and effort. One evening, as the sun set over the city, they stood together on the balcony of Alexander's penthouse. The golden light bathed them in warmth as Alexander turned to her, his expression serious but tender. You know, he began, taking her hand, when you walked into that cafe all those months ago, I never imagined we'd end up here. Elena laughed softly. You mean after I slapped you? He smirked. Exactly. She leaned into him, her smile fading into something softer. I'm glad we did, though, because despite everything, I wouldn't change a thing. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his eyes filled with a depth of emotion she had never seen before. Neither would I, he said. And as they stood there, the city lights twinkling below, both of them knew they had found something rare. A love built not on perfection, but on growth, forgiveness, and unwavering trust. As Elena and Alexander found their way back to each other, their journey reminds us that love isn't about never making mistakes, it's about owning them, growing from them, and choosing to build something stronger together. Their story teaches us that even in moments of misunderstanding and pain, there is always hope for redemption, forgiveness, and a fresh start. If this story touched your heart, imagine how many more powerful and inspiring tales await you. Subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for unforgettable narratives of love, resilience, and second chances, stories that remind us of the beauty and imperfection and the strength of the human heart. Don't forget to like, share, and comment below. What part of Elena and Alexander's journey resonated with you the most? Thank you for joining us on this heartfelt adventure. Until next time, keep believing in love, hope, and the magic of new beginnings.